pizza shop, coffee shop, a lake, another coffee shop, or even at the county clerk to get a marriage license, this AYN Thor has been in my pocket almost everywhere I go. I whip it out, get my dopamine hit, fold it, then put it away. Since we can now play Steam games locally on these Android devices, I was convinced to pick up this purple $400 version to see why people praise this device so much. So I made a community post where you could ask any questions about this device. What games can it run well? How's the comfort for long gaming sessions? Do you consider this a Steam Deck replacement? And many, many more. This device fits in your life instead of around it. It's protected, you know what I mean? You can just throw it in there, man. You don't have joysticks gripping the side of your pocket when you put it in there, right? You're not like constantly stressing if you're scratching the screen with the keys in your pocket or something like that. I genuinely want to fold it up, put it in my pocket. I want to take it places. What games perform well? So this Thor processor is a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, so the same chip in a lot of smartphones. And my rule of thumb is anything that the Steam Deck plays minus 37%. The Odin is what you want if you're really going for power. But for the Thor, you can comfortably play most platformer games like Silk Song. There's other games like Octopath Traveler, Cult of the Lamb, Dave the Diver. And for the bigger games, you can comfortably play things like Fallout 4, Just Cause 3, Dark Souls 3, Valheim, Astroneer, and many others. Essentially, anything that is meant to run on low-end hardware or is before the Unreal Engine, you're pretty good. And as far as new games go, you could in theory run and use frame generation to get up to 60 frames, but that boils down to how okay you are with latency and that frame wobbliness stuff. Also, you don't have to sub if you don't want to sub. If it's your vibe, it's your freaking vibe. If I don't play DS or 3DS games, what purpose will the second screen serve? To be honest with you, man, the reality is that I don't ever really use this bottom screen when I'm playing games, right? You could put on a podcast with Tony Robbins or whatever on the bottom screen while you're playing Cult of the Lamb. But I actually like to get engaged in the game. So what ends up happening most of the time is it just dims down and I just focus on the top screen. Another thing would be like guides, YouTube tutorials, things like that. However, it's still super nice to have this bottom screen, mainly because you can customize it. And with these Cocoon and eSIM launchers, it feels like a super cozy home where you can just essentially choose what games you want to play. You can multitask really, really well, especially if you're like installing APKs or setting up emulators, things like that. This screen is actually fun to have. What made you think you weren't gonna love the Thor, and what changed your mind? I thought I wouldn't like this because based off of like what I see on YouTube and TikTok and whatever, it's only for emulating older games. That kind of turned me away. I like to play the newer stuff. However, because of GameNative and Gamehub and their latest updates and playing Steam games locally on these Android devices, that completely changed the story to now this is within consideration. This felt like it was too emulatey for my liking. And I know I'm not alone when I say that, but if you don't emulate, you can also really have a good time with this device. Does it feel like a toy? Yeah, it does. The outside, when you close it, it feels like pretty cheap. And then when you open it, it starts to feel really expensive. And I've actually seen my friends react in that exact process the way I did. So yeah, it feels like a toy, but in a good way, in a fun way. And the way I see it is it is a toy, right? But it's a good kind of toy because it kind of pulls you away from, spending time on your phone, right? You know what I mean? It is like a toy. And like cigarettes. All right, so before I talk about ergonomics or I compare it to the AYN Odin and other questions, I want to give a huge shout out to UBIGI. Before this Taiwan trip, I set up an eSIM from the UBIGI app, and honestly, it's one of those things that just makes travel easier. Instead of dealing with roaming fees or hunting down a local SIM card when I land, I already have data ready to go. UBIGI works across 200 plus destinations, so if you're traveling around a lot, you don't need a different setup every time. I've been using it here for maps, translations, messaging, uploading content, and pretty much everything else. Speeds have been phenomenal, and the one thing I like is that tethering is supported, so if I need internet on my laptop, I can just hotspot directly from my phone. It also keeps your regular number active for calls and texts while using the eSIM for data, which is super, super convenient. And if you run low on data while traveling, you can top up right inside the app, even if you don't have Wi-Fi available. If you've got a trip coming out, check out UBIGI using the link below and use the code CYBERDOPAMINE for 10% off. Thank you, UBIGI. How's the comfort for long gaming sessions without any grips? So I'll be honest, man, this thing is not that comfortable if you're sitting down for a long time playing games. Like my AYN 3, that's the kind of device where I'll sit down and like, I don't know, spend a couple hours on a game. My brain naturally treats this more like a Tamagotchi than a Steam Deck, if that makes sense. Like, for example, quick 5-minute intervals, right? I literally flip it open, play for 5 or 10 minutes, close it. Come back an hour later, open it back up, play, close. And that doesn't mean you can't play this on this thing for a very, very long time. It's completely doable. It's a gaming handheld at the end of the day, but your hands are gonna have to kind of get used to that at first. I noticed it was quite an adjustment. Thor or Odin 3 when it comes to playing your Steam library on GameNative. Odin 3. It's just comfortable, it's easy to play on, it's reliable, you know it's gonna play. This one's pretty cool for like games that don't have a story, but there's a sense of progression in the game. Okay, so like Cult of the Lamb has a story, I know, but it's kind of like a fun little routine. You know, you go in, fight bad guys, collect stuff, come home, and then you like take care of your little farm and stuff like that. That's a sort of game where you're not fully invested in the story. You're just kind of playing it to kind of let time go. Because of the clamshell design and the pocketable friendliness, it's more or less like literally taking little smoke breaks. Whereas with the Odin 3, that's where I actually like sit down, you know, it stays in my home. I'll take it with me places, but that's where I'll play Witcher 3, follow the story, you know, build my character. Does that make sense? Like, it's hard to explain it, but that's kind of like how I feel about that. Do you consider this a Steam Deck replacement? Kind of, a little bit, barely actually. The Odin 3 is more of a replacement. I still feel the need to own a well-rounded handheld that presents my games in like a very professional manner. This kind of feels like you're doing things you're not necessarily supposed to be doing. In fact, looking back on the many hours I've spent with this device, it's more setting things up and then playing a game to see that I can play it instead of playing a game to enjoy the game. Whereas like a Steam Deck or anything like that, you naturally just play the game to play the game. I feel like this thing is a bit more experimental. I wouldn't consider this a replacement, but this Thor fills in some of the gaps that the Steam Deck can't fill. Portability for one. It's weird I'm saying that, but it's true. There's really no friction between you and the game. Like, obviously there's no friction with a Steam Deck. You can just wake it from sleep. But this one just has zero friction. You open it up and it's instantly there, and it just came from your pocket, right? So there's nothing telling you that you can't do this or pull it out right now. Is the battery life better than the other handhelds running SteamOS? Yeah, because it's on the ARM architecture, this thing runs and behaves like a smartphone. But when you're in game, like for example, Witcher or Skyrim or anything like that, you can see how many watts you're pulling, right? When you're emulating from Steam. You want to kind of get a little bit lower than that, but at 10 watts, 2 hours and 30 minutes of gaming. So it's really, really good. It's not crazy, but it's honestly freaking awesome. This question is in direct correlation with where the future is headed when it comes to gaming. I think portable gaming will shift to ARM because of this battery life that we're getting here. Since the bottom is so glossy, does it get scratched? Also, does the gloss glare a lot in the sun or under light? Dude, this thing freaking reflects. In fact, take a look at this footage of me outside. It's actually fun. You can play outside because OLED, it's bright enough sometimes. It does have some reflections, man. It'll pierce your eye and go down into your soul. But it's nothing too crazy, right? You just kind of move the handheld a little bit. I really like so many things. I'm worried about literally having to set up an operating system and apps all from scratch. Hoping you will address this. So there is a harsh reality with this Thor. If you're emulating, there's a lot of work you've got to do to set this bad boy up. I mean, I'm talking hours upon hours, both on your computer and on this Thor. And to be honest with you, I don't even have the patience to commit to such a thing. I'm only emulating like 2 games because I don't want to freaking do other ones. The rest of the gaming I do is through GameNative and Gamehub, playing Steam games locally. That is the reality. And I wish it were easier, but it's not. You're gonna have to download things, a bunch of emulators, then you have to learn how those emulators work. Then you have to download the games, and then you have to figure out the right settings for the emulators with the game. There's a lot that goes into it. Also, you don't have to sub if you don't want to sub. If it's your vibe, you know, it's your freaking vibe.